to kind of jump right into the meat of what we want to talk about today, really curious as to your thoughts on kind of evaluating these national conversations and conversations in various states about the issues impacting men and boys. And kind of the first question on my mind for you is, what are we missing? What are some of these national conversations missing that might be essential elements to help understand what's going on and help us move towards better solutions?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, again, thank you for having me on. It's a great honor. Um, and I'd have to say, first of all, I think it's welcome that we are having a national conversation about the crisis facing boys and men. I will say sometimes I think the word crisis is overused. It doesn't mean that there aren't challenges, but we probably could have a call focused on the crisis facing girls and women. Um, and it's not a competition, but sometimes when we bifurcate these things, we're elevating one set of challenges over the other. And the reason I think that's sometimes an issue is that the solution set, uh, there's a lot of overlap. So when we talk about things like the importance of marriage, which we'll talk about, or the importance of faith, those are just two factors that would certainly improve outcomes for boys and girls, men and women. So one thing I'm often a little frustrated by is the kind of this idea of bifurcating crises. The other thing I think also, as it relates to boys and men, a lot of the literature, the clock seems to start ticking after men have become fathers and they're facing struggles, right? So obviously, we want better representation opportunities for men when it comes to things like child custody or family law. We're trying to help men recover. That's important. But I think there should be as equal a focus on how do we prevent young men from getting into these situations in the first place. So, as you said, I'm the founder of Vertex Partnership Academies, which is a virtues-based international baccalaureate public charter high school in the Bronx. In our school, we teach something called the success sequence, which again, we can get into, but that's information that we think is really crucial for young people in middle and high school to learn so that they avoid the kinds of decisions that I think are the sort of the precursors to the crisis that we now see facing a lot of young men.
Ian, one of the things I love about your approach, and when we've had you out here in Utah in years past for events, and again, I've had you on the podcast talking about your book, Agency, is this analogy of going upstream comes to mind, that there's so much focus, and it's really easy to focus on kind of the current crisis, whether or not that's the right word to your point. But, as Beth mentioned, we look at the data, we look at the trend lines in male workforce participation rates, in engagement in higher ed institutions, and kind of these other various domains of public life. Is it safe to say that if we're kind of waiting, so to speak, to try and understand and address the challenges facing men until they are already pulling back from major institutions of public life, it's in some ways too late, and we need to be going upstream? Is that kind of the right way to think about it, that we need to be having conversations about young boys and what's best for their development and flourishing?
I think that's exactly right. Now, it is always important to say it's never too late, right? So if there is a young man who's, or an older man who's faced challenges, is feeling disillusioned, feels disconnected, is not part of the workforce, there should be some types of supports that we are putting in place to re-engage that community. But the fact is, it's just much harder. It's just much easier to engage young people earlier. So, so what does the data say that informs the environments that makes both young men and again, young women more likely to make the kinds of decisions that lead to more healthy human flourishing over time? Well, there's the Raj Chetty study, which is interesting to me because it's not usually cited in the evidence around boys and men. But Raj Chetty, for many of your listeners, leads something called Opportunity Insights, which is a think and action tank at Harvard that does incredible research on upward mobility. And they did a project essentially called Where is the Land of Opportunity, really trying to understand what are the factors that really determine whether or not a young person from the lowest economic quintile growing up has the highest probability of economic success when they're 30 or more years older. And one of the things they found that there was a neighborhood effect, that if a young person, even if they're growing up in a household, for example, a single parent household, if they live in a neighborhood where there are more married two parent households in that neighborhood, that young person has a much higher probability of becoming successful themselves in terms of going from the lowest to the highest economic quintile, to seeing role models, to having more positive male mentors, for example, coaches, pastors. And so that's just an example of the kind of neighborhood effect that if we were also to think about that, as much as we think about these things like improved child custody arrangements, sure, but what are the things we should be doing with young people to make it more possible for them to get onto this pathway of healthy relationships, healthy marriages, and then optimally children within marriage?
Ian, I think you're right. I mean, we've had these conversations, a number of them now, and I think they're all kind of leading in this direction to like the sorts of solutions that you're talking about. But it feels like there is some discomfort in having a public discourse that includes the sorts of solutions that you're talking about. I mean, we're not allowed to say you should go get married or you should go to church, or these are challenging levers to push on when it comes to trying to create social change. I mean, what's your take on that?
Yeah, and it's a very fair question, and one that we as leaders who are proponents of healthy marriages, faith formation, we should recognize that sometimes when this message is put out there, it seems like we're moralizing. It seems like we're proselytizing. It seems like we're calling people bad people if, for example, they didn't get married or they had kids outside of marriage. So it's always important to say, for example, that just because a child is born into a single parent household, that's no guarantee that their life is a life of failure, nor, frankly, is if a child is born into a married two parent household, is that a guarantee of success for that child. We have to acknowledge these things, that at the end of the day, every kid and their parent, whatever their household, whatever their faith belief system is, has the power to lead a self-determined life. They may just encounter different hurdles. So we have to be honest about those things. That said, we also have to have the courage to talk about the ideal scenario based on data and, frankly, common sense. And here, actually, the social science is pretty powerful, that if you're talking about things like the boy crisis, the girl crisis, being raised in a married two-parent household, the data does say the likelihood of success is far greater. And there's a common sense element to it. You have two parents, you get twice the love, twice the attention, twice the focus. And there is also something to be said about, again, back to the issue of fatherhood. What is it that makes a father into a great father? And again, by saying this is not the only scenario, but hopefully the thing that makes a father a great father is the fact that they first bonded to their spouse. And that relationship became an agreement to then produce children where you now have a mutual force that is supporting a child. Now, again, by saying these things, it's not casting judgment on single parents, because people become single parents for lots of different reasons. And so we always have to carry that there might be some people reacting in a way that they're turned off because it seems like we're making a moral judgment. And to really advance the ball, I think we have to say that we recognize that we live in a complex society and relationships are difficult, but that shouldn't have us shy away from the message we should be communicating to young people in particular about what are the likely decisions, the likely rewards and consequences associated with different series of life decisions, particularly around family formation, education, and religious faith.
Ian, we need to take a break in just a second. And when we come back, I want to dive into a report that you were a co-author for out of Virginia that talks about some of the stuff in detail. But before we go to break, to really kind of put a fine point on it, I'm thinking about, again, all these conversations we've been having and policymakers at the state level, the national level across the country that are thinking about ways to help address these challenges. And if it's things like looking at the mental health services system, looking at education and workforce policies, and that's all good and necessary, but if we do not include marriage, family stability, faith institutions, those kinds of anchoring aspects of life in the conversation about causes and solutions, are we making a mistake?
Well, I think this is the challenge for most policymakers, people in think tanks, academicians. We can create lots of policy. But the reality is policy has a certain reach into the souls of human beings, into the hearts of people, into the intimate decisions that people make about their own lives, about their relationships, about the children they have, the timing of when they have children. Those are the kinds of things that are affected by morals, we will say it, by virtue. And so policy can only take you so far. And if we don't have the courage to talk about what it means to lead a life of meaning and purpose, then we are missing the boat. And frankly, missing out on some of the most powerful forces that do help decision-making. And so, yes, policy is important, and we'll talk about it more. Things like school choice. That's a great example of a policy effort that creates more opportunities for both more young men and young women to be on an educational, pathway to success. That's great. But there are other things beyond that, sort of technical policy intervention that we also have to have the courage to talk about.
Thanks for watching that clip of Defending Ideas. For the full conversation, click the link in the description and make sure to like and subscribe wherever you get your shows.